In 1994, famed comedian and talk show host Jay Leno lost both of his parents to cancer. Less than a decade later, his little brother Patrick was also diagnosed with the disease. On October 6, 2002, Patrick passed away at age 62. Join FactsVerse as we take a closer look at this tragic chapter of Leno's life and how it's continued to affect him in monumental ways all these years later. Leno's father's death cut him deep. They say the camera never lies, but we know that old expression couldn't be further from the truth. Just watch any TV series, blockbuster film, or reality show, you'll quickly see the camera is more than capable of bending the truth, blurring reality, and distorting the facts. Cable news networks and tech-savvy politicians have been exploiting this fact for ages. Nowhere on TV is the line separating fact and fiction less discernible than on late-night, celebrity-laden talk shows, where guest stars' performances, schmoozing with the host, and presenting a finely crafted version of themselves for millions of viewers is often mistaken for some kind of insightful, candid truth. But this shouldn't be a surprise. After all, if you put an actor in front of a camera, they're going to act. That being said, over the years on late-night TV, we've seen some notable exceptions to this rule. In 1992, Sally Jessy Raphael spoke openly about the tragic death of her daughter, Allison Vladimir, who passed away at age 33. On another occasion, Johnny Carson broke form and allowed himself to be vulnerable in front of the camera when he delivered an emotional eulogy for his 39-year-old son, Rick, who passed away in a car accident in 1991. As Carson discussed his son's passing, he was clearly fighting back tears. There probably wasn't a dry eye in the audience either. Another example of a celebrity pushing aside their theatrics and opening up to the audience was the time Jay Leno delivered a loving testimonial to his late father. This tender moment was brutally honest, unrestrained, and unforgettable. All too often, the media impersonalizes death by discussing it routinely and depicting it in a matter-of-fact way. But Leno's remarks were quite the opposite. Although his show typically was saturated in fun and lightheartedness, this deeply personal segment reminded us all of just how relatable and human Leno really is. He acknowledged just how awkward it was to segue from a humorous monologue to a serious discussion of mortality and loss. He mentioned that for someone in his line of work, someone whose job it is to write jokes and make people laugh, it's difficult when they're dealing with the trials and tribulations of life, just like everyone else. Leno proceeded to tell a few sweet and funny stories about his father in an attempt to keep the mood elevated and not come across as a downer. But despite this approach, there was nothing inauthentic about his heartfelt musing. You could feel his emotions almost as clearly as you can feel your own. On our TV screens, we saw a man who deeply loved and cared about his father. We could see the pain of grief in his eyes. It was genuine and once again distinctly human. When Leno discussed his father's death, it had only been a week since he witnessed him draw his last breath. Without question, the sting of that experience still lingered heavily on his heart and mind. Leno also mentioned during the monologue that his mother, Catherine, had died within the previous year. Heartbreakingly, he revealed his father didn't have much reason to go on once his wife was gone. They had been happily married for 57 years. Jay's father, Angelo, had grown up a street kid in New York City. He was the son of immigrant parents, and he apparently dropped out of school at some point, although Jay says he never found out how far he had gotten, as Angelo would never tell him. As an adult, Angelo became a prize fighter and a truck driver. He was also a gifted mechanic who knew his way around the garage. He eventually made a career as an insurance salesman, working his way up the ladder to become a district manager. After that, Angelo decided to go back to school to further better himself. Jay described him as a real up-from-the-bootstraps kind of guy. Leno further said his father never said a cross word to his mother, nor did he ever raise his hand to her. Angelo loved Catherine with all his heart and would never have done anything to cause her harm. Further painting his father as a man of strong moral caliber, Jay said he never saw him drunk, and never once did he ever utter an ethnic slur. To further illustrate that point, Jay told a story about a letter he received from a woman in Harlem trying to get in touch with his father. As opposed to some of his insurance salesman colleagues who didn't think black people had a future, Angelo never discriminated in his door-to-door insurance sales. In fact, he was the only white person that woman from Harlem ever let into her family's house. Not only did he treat her with dignity and respect as a client, but Angelo evidently also would bring her family gifts and candy while sticking around to tell stories. In his eulogizing, Leno went on to describe how his father and mother never gave up on him. Throughout his life, from those early days when he was virtually a nobody until the years where he was sitting on top of the world as late-night king, Leno's parents were always there to lift him up and remind him he was still their son. Wrapping up his loving testimonial, Leno acknowledged it can be lonely at the top, but even though being a celebrity has come with its share of unexpected troubles and trials, he addressed his father one last time, saying he would never stop fighting the good fight. The death of Leno's brother reopened old wounds. Patrick Leno, Jay Leno's little brother, was born May 12, 1990. Growing up, the two were very close. They lived in Andover, Massachusetts, which is where Patrick later owned a house as an adult. In a 60 Minutes interview in 2014, Jay recalled that Patrick was always the smart one. He attended Yale. Not only was he well educated, but Patrick also distinguished himself as a Vietnam War vet. After serving in the military, he went on to become an attorney. After hitting it big, Jay made sure he could take care of his brother. He even purchased a house for him, which he's continued to hold on to despite Patrick's passing. Jay and Patrick were very different people, but they cared for each other deeply. Patrick was there for Jay when he needed him the most. When their parents died in 1994, the two were each other's emotional support system. That's why when Patrick died of cancer in 2002, Jay felt especially brokenhearted. The passing of Jay's parents, as well as his brother in less than a decade, left him without a family. He's the last of his bloodline still left standing. Fortunately, Leno isn't completely alone these days, as he's been happily married to his beloved wife, Mavis Nicholson, since 1980. The couple don't have children, as Mavis made the decision not to have kids years ago. Jay, being the loving and supporting husband he is, never questioned that decision, and has stood by Mavis's side through thick and thin. Jay stopped hosting The Tonight Show in 2014. Since then, he's hosted the programs Jay Leno's Garage and You Bet Your Life. Despite not officially being retired, Jay no longer is in the spotlight quite like he ever was. At 72, Leno has been enjoying his golden years by pursuing his hobbies and passions. He famously is an avid collector of classic cars. Amazingly, he has 286 vehicles in his collection. Jay and his wife are also very devoted to helping better the world through philanthropy. Some of the organizations and causes they have contributed sizable chunks of wealth to include the Feminist Majority Foundation's campaign to put an end to gender apartheid in Afghanistan, as well as the Robert F. Kennedy Memorial Foundation, the Starkey Hearing Foundation, St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, Live Strong, and the Boys and Girls Club of America. As you might have heard, on November 12, 2022, Leno suffered severe burns to his hands and face when a vehicle at his LA garage burst into flames. Fortunately, after spending 2 weeks in the hospital receiving treatment, Leno is expected to make a full recovery. Now it's time to hear from you. Did you know that Jay Leno lost his mother, father, and little brother Patrick all to cancer within just 1 decade? Let us know in the comments section below.